I was always the forgotten daughter, until they needed my kidney. My father hadn't called me directly in 3 years. Not for my birthday. Not when my kids started new school years. Not even when I'd spent 3 weeks sick with pneumonia last winter and could barely get out of bed. He texted occasionally, generic one-line check-ins that felt copied and pasted to every family contact. Holidays were always orchestrated around my younger brother Kevin's schedule, his career wins, his perfect out-of-state life. I was the daughter who didn't need checking in. The one who was fine on her own. So when his name popped up on my phone last Tuesday evening, my stomach dropped before I even answered. I knew instinctively it wasn't good news. It wasn't love or concern driving the call. It was need. The only time my parents ever saw me clearly was when they needed something only I could give them. I was standing in my kitchen after dinner, wiping down the counters while my 11-year-old daughter finished her homework at the table and my 8-year-old son colored quietly on the floor. The house was calm, routine, predictable, the quiet suburban life I'd spent 14 years building with my husband Michael. My days were steady, grounded. As a high school guidance counselor, I spent every work hour helping kids untangle messy family dynamics, process neglect, heal from parental favoritism, and learn to set boundaries with people who took them for granted. I was great at giving advice. Terrible at taking it for myself. I paused my cleaning rag and stared at the ringing screen for 2 full seconds before I swiped to answer. His voice was flat, businesslike, no warmth, no greeting, no small talk. Just sharp, unfiltered urgency, like he was delivering a work assignment instead of talking to his daughter. Natalie. It's your dad. Your mom's sick. Her kidneys are failing. She needs a transplant immediately. We need you to come in and get tested. There was no "how are you?" No, I'm sorry to tell you this. No gentle lead-in. Just a demand. A requirement. A task for me to complete for the family. I stood frozen in my quiet kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator loud in my ears, my kids oblivious to the crack splitting open my world. I'd spent my entire life being the dependable one, the strong one, the child who never burdened anyone. Kevin was the fragile, gifted son who needed investment, protection, endless support. I was the daughter who figured it out alone. Now they needed a piece of my body to save my mother's life. I grew up knowing my brother was the favorite child. It wasn't subtle, wasn't a vague childhood feeling I'd romanticized or exaggerated over time. It was concrete, measurable, impossible to ignore. It was baked into every birthday, every holiday, every conversation my parents ever had about potential, success, and family legacy. Kevin was 2 years younger than me, and from the day he was born, he was the family's golden child. My parents treated him like their greatest achievement, like his existence validated their entire marriage. Every resource they had went straight to him without hesitation, without second-guessing, without requiring him to earn a single thing. He had private tutors throughout grade school while I taught myself math from library textbooks. He got a brand new car at 16 while I walked to my part-time job in the rain and snow. He had his entire out-of-state private college tuition fully covered, no loans, no debt, no sacrifice required. My parents handed him down payments for his first condo, then his upgraded townhouse, then his luxury suburban home in a wealthy neighborhood 3 states away. I worked my way through community college alone. I took double shifts at a coffee shop to cover tuition and textbooks. I lived in my beat-up old sedan for an entire semester just to save enough money for a tiny studio apartment, never telling my parents how close I was to homelessness. When I finally told them years later, they just shrugged and said I'd always been resourceful. Resourceful. Strong. Independent. Those were their favorite words for me. They sounded like compliments to outsiders. To me, they were excuses. A way to justify never showing up for me, never investing in me, never worrying if I was okay. Kevin was worried over. I was assumed to be fine. I'd spent decades swallowing that quiet, burning resentment. I'd rationalized it, softened it, told myself my parents simply had different ways of loving their kids. Kevin needed more guidance, more support, more chances. I didn't. I was steady. I was grounded. I survived. I built my entire adult life around that quiet endurance. I married Michael straight out of college, 2 kids young, determined to create the stable, present, loving family I'd never had growing up. I refused to play favorites with my children. I listened to them, remembered their likes and fears and struggles, showed up for every small moment because I knew exactly how it felt to be invisible in your own home. Somewhere along the way, though, Michael started drifting. At first, I told myself it was normal midlife fatigue, career burnout, the quiet exhaustion of raising 2 young kids and paying a mortgage. He started staying late at work more often, missing family dinners, scrolling his phone silently at night instead of talking to me. He stopped asking about my day, stopped comforting me when my family's latest neglect stung, stopped celebrating my small wins. I ignored the red flags, just like I'd ignored them with my parents for decades. I accommodated his distance, made excuses for his absence, told myself I was overreacting, that I was too sensitive, that I was always too focused on my family's drama instead of our marriage. I didn't know then that my quiet sacrifice, my endless understanding, my habit of carrying everyone else's weight was pushing him further away. I didn't know he was already finding connection, attention, and admiration from someone else, someone who didn't carry decades of family trauma, someone who didn't spend her life prioritizing everyone else's survival over her own peace. Before my father's phone call, I still believed my marriage was solid. Frayed around the edges, tired from years of responsibility, but loyal. I still believed Michael saw me, truly saw me, even when my own family didn't. I had no idea my entire world was already cracking open from 2 different directions at once. My family was about to ask me for the ultimate sacrifice, and my husband was already halfway out the door, falling for a woman who he thought would finally make him feel like a priority. I agreed to the testing without hesitation. Old habits die hard. Even after a lifetime of being overlooked, my instinct was still to be the good daughter, the reliable one, the person who shows up when everyone else abandons ship. I scheduled my first hospital appointment alone. Michael said he was swamped with end-of-quarter deadlines, that he couldn't take time off work. I nodded and told him it was fine, that I was used to handling things on my own. It was true. I'd been handling everything alone for 40 years. The testing process was invasive and exhausting. Blood work after blood work, imaging scans, consultations, physical evaluations that left me sore and drained. I woke up early for appointments, sat in cold hospital waiting rooms by myself, filled out stacks of paperwork while my kids were at school and my husband was at work. Throughout all of it, my brother Kevin was nowhere to be found. He texted once a generic "hope everything goes okay" message. He called twice, short rushed conversations where he barely let me speak before excusing himself for work meetings. He sent a bouquet of white lilies to my parents' house, flowers he knew our mother had hated her entire life. It was performative, empty, thoughtless. The perfect symbol of his entire role in our family, present for appearances, absent for every hard, real moment. My parents never once asked how I was feeling through any of it. Never asked if the testing hurt, never checked if I was overwhelmed, never thanked me for stepping up when their golden son couldn't or wouldn't. 3 weeks later, the hospital called with the results. I was a perfect match. The news spread through my family instantly. My mother called me for the first time in years, her voice shaky with relief, but her words hollow and scripted. "I always knew you were my good girl, Natalie," she said. "You've always been so reliable. This is going to save my life." There was no gratitude in it. No warmth. No recognition of what I was about to give up. It was just a statement of fact. I was the obedient, dependable daughter who would fix their problem for them. In that moment, standing alone in my bedroom after the call, I felt a cold, sharp truth settle over me. My entire life had been preparation for this exact moment. I was raised to be overlooked so I would be willing to sacrifice everything when they finally needed me. In the days after learning I was a match, the weight of what I'd agreed to settled heavy in my bones. Doctors walked me through every risk, every long-term consequence of kidney donation. I would face months of physical recovery, chronic fatigue, heightened infection risk, and permanent changes to my body. I would have to step back from work, pause my routine, and rely on others to carry my household and family responsibilities, something I never did easily. No one in my family acknowledged any of it. No one asked what I would lose. All they saw was the life I would save for them. My parents began talking about the surgery like it was a finalized victory, not a brutal choice I was making alone. They chatted casually about recovery timelines, about how quickly Mom would bounce back, about how we'd have the whole family together for holidays once she was healthy again. Their tone was light, relieved, unburdened. It never crossed their minds to carry even a fraction of my stress. Kevin posted a glossy family photo on his social media that week. It was taken 2 years prior, at a summer barbecue, him and his wife Louise smiling bright in the center of the frame, my parents glowing proudly beside them. I was tucked in the far background, half out of focus, cropped nearly out of the shot entirely. His caption read, "Grateful for my perfect family. Praying for Mom's quick recovery." I stared at that post for a long time, my chest tight with a familiar old ache. He was out here performing devotion for the world to see while I sat in hospital waiting rooms alone, enduring needle pricks and scans and anxiety no one bothered to witness. His goodness was public. My sacrifice was silent, invisible, unworthy of a single post or public acknowledgement. Through all of this, Michael's distance only grew worse. He left before I woke up most mornings and came home long after the kids and I had eaten dinner. He stopped asking about my hospital appointments entirely. If I tried to update him on surgery dates or doctor warnings, he'd nod absently, stare at his laptop, and mumble something about being swamped. He never offered to come with me. Never offered to take over kid duty or housework to ease my load. Never even asked if I was scared. I told myself I was being unfair to resent him. I was buried in my family's chaos, after all. It made sense he'd pull back to manage his own work stress. I'd spent years prioritizing my parents and brother even when they gave me nothing in return, so I forced myself to believe he was just burned out from holding space for my endless family baggage. I kept forgiving his absence, kept making excuses, kept choosing to trust the man I'd loved for 14 years. The first crack in that trust appeared on a random Thursday night, when I was folding his work jacket after laundry day. The fabric was crisp from the dryer, still warm, and when I slipped my hand into the inner pocket to pull out loose change or receipts, my fingers brushed a thick, glossy restaurant receipt. I pulled it out without thinking, assuming it was a quick work lunch or a team dinner he'd mentioned in passing weeks prior. My breath stalled when I scanned the details. It was from a high-end downtown steakhouse, the kind with valet parking and 3-figure wine lists, the kind we'd never once afforded for our own anniversary dinners. The date was a Tuesday night, 2 weeks prior, the exact evening he'd told me he had a mandatory late-night work strategy meeting with his team. The receipt listed 2 full steak dinners, 2 premium cocktails, an expensive dessert, and a bottle of red wine. It was a romantic meal, not a business one. No tip line for a team server, no multiple entries for coworkers. Just 2 people, dining slow and fancy, long into the night while I sat home alone, putting our kids to bed and worrying over upcoming surgery risks no one cared about. I stared at the paper in my hands until the ink blurred. My first instinct wasn't anger, it was denial. I must have misread the date. It must have been a client dinner I'd forgotten about. He'd mentioned high-stakes client meetings before, right? I folded the receipt neatly and tucked it into my nightstand drawer. I didn't confront him that night. I didn't ask questions. I buried the doubt deep, just like I'd buried every unfair childhood wound, every overlooked slight, every quiet disappointment with my family. I was so used to being let down that I'd learned to pre-forgive people before they even hurt me. But doubt doesn't stay buried forever. It festers, slow and quiet, under every routine moment in your marriage. After finding that receipt, I started noticing everything I'd spent years ignoring. Michael started locking his phone at night. He kept it face down on every surface, never leaving it unattended. He deleted text threads immediately, turned off notification previews, and flinched if I so much as glanced at his screen. He showered the second he walked in the door, like he was washing off traces of somewhere he shouldn't have been. He stopped touching me entirely. No casual hand brushes in the kitchen, no goodnight hugs, no lazy Sunday cuddles on the couch. Our marriage shrank overnight to nothing but shared bills, shared kids, and silent empty rooms. Still, I didn't say a word. I was mid-medical testing, weeks away from major surgery, already drowning in the weight of saving a mother who'd never loved me fairly. I didn't have the bandwidth to unpack a failing marriage too. I chose peace over truth, just like I always had. The breaking point didn't come from me. It came from my innocent 11-year-old daughter, Lila, who noticed the cracks in our family long before I was brave enough to name them. It was a Saturday afternoon, warm and bright, the kind of lazy weekend day we usually spent running errands, baking cookies, and watching family movies. Michael had offered to take the kids to the grocery store alone, saying I should rest and recover from my latest round of testing. I'd thanked him quietly, grateful for the small reprieve, and stayed home to clean the house. They came back an hour later, the kids bounding through the door with grocery bags in their hands, Michael trailing behind them quiet and distant. Lila found me in the living room a minute later, her small hand clamped tight around a tiny velvet jewelry box. Her brows were furrowed in quiet confusion, her young eyes full of questions she didn't know how to ask. "Mom," she said softly, holding the box out to me. "I found these in Dad's car, under the passenger seat. They're pretty, but they're not yours. Are they a gift for me?" My heart dropped straight to my stomach. I opened the box slowly, my hands already trembling. Inside lay a pair of delicate gold hoop earrings lined with tiny sparkling diamonds, expensive, modern, elegant. Nothing I'd ever worn. Nothing I'd ever asked for. Nothing Michael had ever purchased for me in 14 years of marriage. I stared at them, and every lie, every late night, every locked phone, every distant glance crashed over me all at once. The fancy steak dinner. The endless work nights. The sudden emotional detachment. The quiet shame in his eyes every time he looked at me lately. It wasn't work burnout. It wasn't stress. It wasn't my family's drama weighing on him. It was another woman. I set the jewelry box down on the coffee table gently, like it was made of glass, and told Lila to go play with her brother in the backyard. Would you instantly confront your spouse if you found expensive jewelry meant for another woman hidden in their car? She hesitated for a second, like she could sense the storm building in me, then nodded and ran outside. Would you instantly confront your spouse if you found expensive jewelry meant for another woman hidden in their car? Michael walked into the living room moments later, pausing when he saw my face. He knew instantly. He could read the silence in me, the stillness that always came right before I broke. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice tight, defensive before I even spoke. I gestured to the earrings on the table. "Who are these for?" His jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, avoided my eyes, and tried to deliver the practiced casual lie I knew he'd prepared for months. "They're just a client gift. For a coworker's birthday. I forgot I left them in the car." I laughed then, a quiet, hollow sound that didn't feel like my own. "A client gift. For a coworker. You buy diamond earrings for work acquaintances now?" When he didn't answer, when he couldn't meet my gaze, I pulled the crumpled steakhouse receipt out of my nightstand drawer and set it down beside the jewelry box. "Explain this too," I said. "The Tuesday night dinner for two. The wine. The dessert. The night you said you were in a work meeting." The color drained from his face in an instant. All his fake composure vanished. The lies crumbled away, and for the first time in months, he looked me straight in the eyes, with guilt, with shame, but no denial left. He didn't beg for forgiveness. He didn't plead for a second chance. He didn't start with an apology. Instead, he sighed, like I was the one who'd ruined everything, like I was the unreasonable one for uncovering his secrets. "Okay," he said quietly. "It's true. I've been seeing someone. Her name's Jennifer. She's a colleague from my office. My world tilted on its axis. 14 years of marriage. 2 kids. A lifetime of shared struggles, shared dreams, shared healing from our broken childhoods. All of it unraveled in 3 simple words. I stared at the man I'd loved since I was 19 years old, the man who'd once been my only safe place, and asked the question that broke every remaining piece of my heart. Why? His answer was crueler than any lie he'd ever told me. It was honest, unfiltered, and it cut deeper than any betrayal I could have imagined. Because you're never present, Natalie, he said, his voice sharp with pent-up resentment. For years, it's always been your parents, your brother, their problems. You drop everything for them, even when they never lift a finger for you. You're so busy being the perfect, sacrificial daughter that you stopped being my wife. Jennifer sees me. She appreciates me. She makes me feel like a priority. I froze, every muscle in my body locking up in pure, stunned agony. He was right. I was always the one sacrificing. Always the one showing up for people who never showed up for me. Always the one carrying everyone else's pain and problems while swallowing my own. But to hear him frame my lifelong trauma, my learned survival instinct, my endless capacity to care for others, as the reason he cheated? In that second, I understood the full, devastating truth of my entire existence. My parents overlooked me because I was reliable. My husband left me for someone else because I was too devoted to the people who hurt me. I was never anyone's priority. I was only ever everyone's convenience. The worst part of it all was the sickening echo. Michael's words matched my parents' treatment perfectly. They both resented me for my goodness. They both took my sacrifice for granted. They both abandoned me for something newer, easier, more self-serving. I'd spent my whole life trying to earn love by being good, by being dependable, by never causing trouble. And in the end, my goodness was exactly what drove everyone away. I didn't scream or cry or argue. I just stood there in my quiet living room, the sunlight streaming through the windows, my kids laughing happily in the backyard, completely unaware their family was breaking apart forever, and I felt every last piece of my hope shatter. Michael tried to reach for my hand, his tone softening into rushed regret. I'm sorry, Natalie. I didn't mean for it to go this far. It started as emotional, just talking. It got out of hand. I can fix this. We can fix this. I pulled my hand away before he could touch me. There was nothing to fix. The damage wasn't just the affair. The damage was the fact that every single person I'd ever loved had taught me the same brutal lesson: loving me wasn't enough. Choosing me was never worth the effort. I turned and walked away from him, leaving the earrings and the receipt on the table as silent proof of everything I'd lost. In the weeks after Michael's confession, I existed in a state of numb, hollow grief. I moved through my days on autopilot. I got up, fed my kids, went to work, attended my final pre-surgery appointments, and came home to a silent, fractured house where my husband slept on the couch and avoided my eyes at all costs. He alternated between desperate apologies and bitter resentment. Some nights he'd beg for forgiveness, promise to cut off contact with Jennifer, swear he'd do anything to save our marriage. Other nights he'd grow cold and distant again, muttering about how none of this would have happened if I'd just put him first for once. He never once apologized for abandoning me during my medical crisis. Never once acknowledged that I was weeks away from major surgery, carrying the weight of my family's endless greed and my marriage's sudden collapse all alone. My family didn't notice my pain either. They never asked why I sounded tired on the phone, why I was quieter than usual, why I no longer jumped to answer their every call and demand. They only cared that the surgery date was approaching, that their lifeline was still intact, that I hadn't backed out of saving the mother who'd never loved me best. Kevin called once more, days before the scheduled operation, to confirm travel plans. His tone was casual, upbeat, like we were preparing for a family vacation instead of a life-altering surgery I was undergoing alone. I'll fly in the night before, he said breezily. I've got a big client presentation the morning of the surgery, so I might be late to the hospital. but I'll be there eventually. I held the phone in my hand, my throat tight with unspoken rage and sorrow, and said nothing. Of course he'd be late. Of course his career came first. Of course my sacrifice was still secondary to his perfect, privileged life. No one was coming for me. No one was standing with me. Everyone was just waiting to collect the reward of my pain. I was days away from giving a vital part of my body to a family that had spent 40 years erasing me. I was days away from surviving major surgery with no spouse to care for me, no sibling to support me, no parent to thank me truly. I had hit my lowest point. And in that dark, lonely place, with every person I'd ever loved failing me completely, I finally started to see the truth I'd spent my entire life avoiding. My goodness was never a strength to them. It was a tool. My loyalty wasn't cherished, it was exploited. My endless willingness to bend, to sacrifice, to show up when everyone else walked away wasn't a virtue in their eyes. It was an open invitation to take everything I had and give nothing back. For 40 years, I'd chased a love that was never going to exist. I'd waited for my parents to notice me, for my brother to defend me, for my husband to prioritize me. I'd spent my whole life proving I was worthy of being chosen, worthy of being loved, worthy of being put first. And in the quiet darkness before my surgery, I finally understood, worth isn't earned through sacrifice. Worth is inherent. I didn't need to give a kidney to be valuable. I didn't need to be reliable, obedient, or selfless to deserve care, attention, and devotion. I deserved those things simply because I existed. This quiet epiphany didn't arrive as a burst of anger or a dramatic breakdown. It settled over me slow and steady, like dawn breaking after the longest night of my life. I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped begging for crumbs. I stopped rationalizing the unforgivable choices of the people who were supposed to love me most. I still planned to go through with the surgery. Not for my parents. Not for Kevin. Not to earn their approval or their gratitude. I was doing it for my mother's life, because I was still human, still compassionate, still incapable of wishing harm on anyone, even those who'd harmed me endlessly. But I was no longer doing it out of obligation. I was doing it with my eyes wide open, fully aware of every unfair truth hanging over our broken family. And this time I was not going to stay silent about it. In the final 48 hours before I checked into the hospital, I stopped making excuses for everyone. I stopped answering my parents' rushed check-in calls with gentle politeness. I stopped comforting Michael when he spiraled into guilt and self-pity. I stopped letting Kevin's performative kindness fool me. I spent those quiet nights alone in my room, going through old family documents, sorting through medical paperwork the hospital had sent over for pre-surgery verification, organizing my own life before I stepped into weeks of physical recovery. I was halfway through sorting a stack of my father's old financial files, papers he'd left at our house years ago and never bothered to retrieve, when I stumbled across something that shattered every remaining illusion I held about my family's perfect facade. Buried under tax forms and old utility bills were bank statements dating back 15 years. At first, I almost tossed them aside, ready to dismiss them as irrelevant old records. But a pattern jumped out at me immediately, sharp and impossible to ignore. Every single month, without fail, my father had wired a consistent sum of money to a name I'd never seen before, Elizabeth Carter. The payments weren't small, one-time gifts or charitable donations. They were regular, substantial deposits, month after month, year after year, totaling tens of thousands of dollars over a decade and a half. Curiosity turned to cold dread as I flipped through page after page of statements, tracing the payments back to when I was in my early 20s, right after I'd graduated college and started struggling to survive on my own. I pulled up public records on my phone, my hand steady despite the chaos swirling in my chest, and searched for Elizabeth Carter. What I found stopped my breath entirely. Elizabeth was a woman my father had met at a national business conference 15 years prior. She lived 2 hours away in a neighboring suburb. And she had a teenage child, a son, whose age lined up perfectly with the start of my father's secret monthly payments. My father had been supporting another woman and another child for 15 years. He'd been living a double life this entire time. All the money he'd poured into Kevin's tuition, his cars, his down payments, all the money he'd withheld from me during my poorest, most desperate years, all the money he'd claimed went entirely to our family's stability. Part of it had been funding a secret second family all along. Could you forgive a parent who secretly funded another family while letting you struggle to survive alone? The favoritism wasn't just parental preference. It was a deliberate, calculated distraction. My parents had built the entire narrative of Kevin the golden child, Natalie the strong survivor, to cover up the rot at the center of their marriage. They'd let me struggle, let me suffer, let me go homeless for a semester, let me fight for every small win alone, because my father's money and emotional energy were tied up in a life he hid from all of us. The worst revelation came when I connected the final piece of the puzzle. My mother knew. She'd known every single year. She'd watched him drain family funds for another woman and another child. She'd stayed silent, tolerated the betrayal, played the role of loyal wife and perfect mother for decades, all to preserve her own financial security. She had no independent savings, no career of her own, no way to survive on her own after decades of relying entirely on my father's income. Her kidney failure wasn't just a health crisis. It was her last desperate attempt to anchor my father to our family. It was her final play to keep him from leaving her entirely for the woman and child he'd been supporting in secret. And I was the pawn. I was the sacrifice she'd been counting on. She wasn't begging for her daughter's kindness. She was manipulating my goodness to save a fake marriage, to secure her own future, to keep her comfortable life intact. I sat on my bedroom floor surrounded by scattered bank statements for hours, processing the decades of lies that had shaped my entire childhood. Every unfair slight, every ignored struggle, every unearned advantage Kevin received suddenly made terrifying sense. My father overcompensated for his secret guilt by spoiling Kevin rotten, building up his son's success as a public testament to his perfect family image. He neglected me entirely because I was the child who saw too much, who asked too few questions, who survived independently without his help, proof he could get away with abandoning his responsibilities at home. When Kevin arrived in town the night before my surgery, he showed up at my parents' house with expensive wine and a practiced smile, ready to play the devoted son for the family cameras. He greeted our parents warmly, hugged our mother like he was her greatest support, and barely glanced at me as I sat quiet and exhausted on the living room couch. I'd spent hours debating whether to confront him before the surgery, whether to unpack the decades of unfairness we'd both lived through. That night, worn thin from medical stress, marital betrayal, and the horror of my father's secret double life, I finally snapped. I pulled him aside into the quiet hallway, away from my parents' ears, and spoke in a low, steady voice that held none of my usual softness. "Do you ever feel guilty?" I asked him. "Do you ever look back and realize everything you got was everything I was denied? Do you know I lived in my car to put myself through school while Dad wrote you checks for luxury homes?" For the first time in his life, Kevin's perfect, charming facade crumbled completely. His smile dropped. His competent posture deflated. He looked away from me, his jaw tight, his eyes filled with a guilt I'd never seen from him before. He didn't deny it. He didn't make excuses about different needs or parental choices. He just exhaled a long, shaky breath and told me the truth he'd been hiding for 20 years. "I was 18 when Dad sat me down," he said quietly. "Right before I left for college. He told me straight out. He said you were strong enough to make it on your own. That you'd always been self-sufficient. He said I was the fragile one, the one who needed his money, his support, his connections to succeed. He told me if I ever tried to advocate for you, if I ever questioned how he treated you, he'd cut me off entirely. No tuition, no support, no inheritance, nothing." My chest ached so sharply I could barely breathe. It was worse than I'd ever imagined. It wasn't just that my parents favored him. It was that my father had explicitly, deliberately chosen to sacrifice my future for Kevin's success. He'd weaponized my strength against me, turned my resilience into a reason to abandon me entirely. "I was young," Kevin whispered, his voice breaking. "I was scared. I didn't want to lose everything. I went along with it because I thought I had no choice. I told myself you'd be okay, that you'd always been okay. But I knew it was wrong. I've known it my entire adult life. I just never had the courage to say anything. His confession didn't make me forgive him. It didn't erase a lifetime of his complacency, his privilege, his empty performative love. But it did change everything. It stripped away the last of my childhood confusion. This wasn't random parental preference. This was systemic, intentional cruelty. A father who chose one child over the other to feed his own ego and hide his own secrets. A brother who chose his own security over his sister's well-being. You weren't a victim, I told him calmly, no anger, no malice, just unshakable truth. You were a participant. You stayed silent while I suffered. You enjoyed every benefit of my abandonment. That's not fear, Kevin. That's complicity. He stood frozen in the hallway, tears in his eyes, unable to argue with me. For the first time in his life, he was seeing the full cost of his perfect life. He was finally understanding that every luxury he'd ever owned was bought with my sacrifice. The next morning, I checked into the hospital for surgery. Michael drove me there, silent and remorseful, but his presence felt hollow and obligatory. He hadn't earned the right to support me. My parents fussed over hospital paperwork, their focus entirely on my mother's pre-op vitals, never once checking on my anxiety or my pain. Kevin arrived late, just as he'd warned he would, rushing in with a fake apologetic smile, still prioritizing his work image over my well-being. Minutes before they wheeled me into the operating room, I was left alone with my mother in the quiet pre-op room. The nurses stepped out to finalize surgical preparations, leaving us in total silence. It was just the two of us, after 40 years of fractured, unfair, unbalanced love. I stared at her tired, anxious face, at the woman who'd given me life but never genuine affection, who'd watched me struggle alone for decades, who'd stayed complicit in my father's lies and my brother's privilege, who was now relying on my body to save her life. I asked her the question I'd waited my entire life to ask. "What do I get out of this, Mom?" I said softly. "Not gratitude. Not empty praise. What do I actually gain from giving you a part of me, after a lifetime of being overlooked and forgotten?" For the first time ever, she didn't give me a scripted answer. She didn't call me good, or reliable, or strong. She dropped every pretense, every maternal performance, and told me the cold, unvarnished truth she'd spent decades hiding. "You get to be the better one," she said quietly. "You get to walk away knowing you're kinder, more loyal, more human than any of us. That's what you've always had. That's what you'll always have. We never deserved you, Natalie. All of us." Her words landed in my chest like a final verdict on my entire childhood. It was the closest she would ever come to an apology. The closest she would ever get to admitting every unfair thing they'd done to me. She knew I was better. She knew I was wronged. She knew I deserved more than crumbs. But she'd never chosen to give it to me anyway. In that moment, I felt the last thread of my childhood hope snap clean. I wasn't sad anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. I didn't need their apologies. I didn't need their regret. I didn't need them to finally see my worth. I saw it now, all on my own. The surgery went smoothly, clinically perfect in every way. The doctors praised the clean match, the healthy transplant, the seamless way my body adapted to the procedure. To the medical staff, it was a success story, a daughter saving her mother's life through pure generosity and grace. No one in that hospital knew the weight of the lies I was carrying, the decades of neglect stitched into this single surgical choice. No one knew I was healing a broken family that had never once bothered to heal me. I woke up hours later in a dim recovery room, throbbing with a deep, persistent physical pain that paled in comparison to the emotional weight lifting off my shoulders. My mother rested in a separate adjacent room, already receiving visitors, already surrounded by my father's quiet relief and Kevin's performative concern. My recovery space was silent, empty, save for a single nurse checking vitals every hour. No one rushed to my side. No one held my hand through the anesthesia fog. No one whispered that they were proud of me, that they were sorry, that they finally understood everything they'd put me through. Michael sat in the waiting room alone, scrolling his phone, looking every bit the guilty, awkward stranger he'd become. Kevin lingered by my mother's doorway, accepting thanks from distant relatives over text, posting another vague, heartfelt social media update about family blessings and second chances. My father hovered near the nurse's station, anxious not for my condition, but for whether my mother's recovery would hold, whether his fraudulent family unit would stay intact. By the time I was coherent enough to speak, the room had filled with all of them. Kevin stepped in first, carrying an expensive gift bag with a designer scarf inside, a last-minute peace offering, shallow and transactional, his attempt to erase 20 years of complacency with fabric and thread. He set the bag on my bedside table, his voice thick with manufactured remorse. "I'm so sorry I was late this morning. Work was chaotic. I'm really proud of you, Nat. This means everything to Mom, to all of us." I turned my head slowly on the hospital pillow, my body sore and weak, but my gaze steady and unyielding. I didn't touch the gift. I didn't soften for his guilt. I didn't let him hide behind his usual charm. "You're not proud of me," I said quietly. "You're relieved I didn't let Mom die. You're grateful I saved the family image you've spent your whole life polishing. You're here because if she passes, you lose the perfect parental narrative you benefited from since we were kids. You're not here for me." Kevin's smile shattered. He stumbled back half a step, his eyes wide with shock, and used to me pushing back, and used to me stripping away his polite lies to expose the selfish truth underneath. "That's not fair," he started, weak and defensive. "I've always cared about you. You cared about your place in this family." I cut him off gently, firmly, without malice. "You cared about not getting disinherited. You cared about keeping your easy, privileged life intact. You knew exactly what Dad was doing to me. You knew he was hoarding resources for you while I starved for stability. You stayed quiet. You benefited. Don't pretend that's love." He had no reply. His lips parted, but no excuse came out, because there was no excuse left to give. The truth hung thick in the hospital air, unshakable and clear. I turned my attention to Michael next, and his shoulders immediately tensed, like he was bracing for anger, for screaming, for the explosive breakdown he'd been expecting since I found his secrets. I gave him none of that. I spoke softly, evenly, the way I spoke to my students when I was guiding them out of toxic relationships, calm, clear, final. "You're here today because you're scared," I told him. "You're scared I'll leave and take our kids. You're scared you'll lose the stable home I built for you while you chased someone who made you feel temporary and new. You're not here because you love me. You're here because you don't want to lose the life I gave you." Michael's face crumpled. All his lingering resentment melted away, replaced with raw, unfiltered shame. He'd spent months painting himself as a victim, blaming my family devotion for his choices, but in that hospital room, facing my quiet strength, he finally saw how cowardly and selfish his behavior had been. "Natalie, please," he whispered. "I know I messed up. I know I took you for granted. Let me fix this. Let me be better for you and the kids." "You can't fix it," I said. "You can't unlearn the habit of leaving me behind when things get hard. You can't undo the fact that when I was at my most vulnerable, you sought comfort elsewhere. You can't fix the truth that you resented me for carrying pain you once said you understood." I paused, letting the words settle, before I turned finally to my father. He stood in the corner, quiet and stiff, his usual authoritative energy deflated, his eyes darting away from mine like he feared I'd read every hidden secret written on his face. "You're here to make sure your life doesn't fall apart," I said to him. "You're here because Mom's survival keeps your public reputation clean, keeps your secret second family hidden, keeps your lies from unraveling. You spent 15 years funding another woman and another child while I slept in my car. You spent decades building Kevin up while erasing me entirely. You asked me for a kidney not out of love, but out of convenience. My father's jaw tightened. He opened his mouth to argue, to defend his legacy, to call me ungrateful, but the words died in his throat. He knew I knew everything. He knew the facade was broken beyond repair. I looked across all three of them, the brother who chose privilege over me, the husband who chose novelty over our marriage, the father who chose lies over his daughter, and spoke the final, decisive truth that closed every chapter of my old life. I have given this family everything. My time, my effort, my youth, my stability, my body. I have sacrificed and endured and forgiven for 40 years. This kidney is the last thing I will ever give any of you. From this day forward, I stop sacrificing myself for people who never sacrifice for me. The room went completely silent. The hum of hospital monitors felt deafening in the quiet. None of them could meet my eyes. Kevin stared at his shoes. Michael stared at his hands. My father stared at the wall, unable to bear the weight of his own failure. There were no more arguments, no more excuses, no more performative apologies. For the first time in my life, my family sat with the full, unvarnished truth of how they'd treated me. For the first time, they didn't get to rewrite the narrative to make themselves look good. Recovery was slow and physically brutal. For weeks, I struggled with fatigue, soreness, and limited mobility. I could barely lift my children, barely keep up with basic household tasks, barely work full-time. But even in my physical weakness, I felt stronger than I'd ever been emotionally. I filed for divorce 2 weeks after I was released from the hospital. I did it quietly, cleanly, without anger, without revenge. I didn't fight for excessive alimony, didn't drag his affair through public court, didn't try to ruin his reputation. I simply chose myself. I told Michael plainly, I was not punishing him. I was freeing myself. A marriage that only valued me when I was useful was not a marriage worth saving. A love that vanished the second I stopped sacrificing was never love at all. Michael fought the divorce for a time, desperate to hold on to the stable life he'd nearly destroyed. He promised therapy, promised accountability, promised endless changes. But I'd already healed enough to know better. Change that only arrives after betrayal, after loss, after consequence, is not genuine growth, it is fear. I did not want a husband who only cherished me when I was about to leave him. I negotiated a fair, gentle custody arrangement for our kids, prioritizing their stability over conflict. I kept our peaceful, respectful co-parenting dynamic for their sake, but I closed every emotional door between us. He was their father now, not my partner. He would never again get access to my heart, my loyalty, or my endless grace. With my family, I established firm, unbreakable boundaries. I spoke to my father directly about Elizabeth and his secret second life. I told him I would no longer participate in his fake perfect family performances. I would no longer attend holidays that centered Kevin's glory while minimizing my existence. I would no longer lie for him, no longer cover his cracks, no longer help him maintain a reputation he did not earn. My father tried to deflect, to minimize, to gaslight me into believing I was overreacting. But I stayed steady. I had proof. I had truth. I had no more desire to beg for his approval. I told Kevin I loved him, but that love would no longer include silent compliance with his privilege. I would no longer pretend our childhood was fair. I would no longer comfort his guilt, no longer validate his performative goodness, no longer carry the weight of his poor choices for him. If he wanted a relationship with me and his niece and nephew, it would be on equal, honest terms, no more hidden debts, no more unspoken sacrifices, no more one-sided loyalty. My mother reached out multiple times after her full recovery, attempting to return to our old dynamic, casual, surface-level calls, empty praise, quiet expectation that I would fall back into the role of the grateful, dependable daughter. I never lashed out at her. I never spoke cruelly. But I never fell back into line either. I spoke to her honestly, gently, about the cost of her choices. I told her I forgave her ignorance, but I would no longer enable her complacency. She could have a relationship with me, but she would never again get my unwavering sacrifice without acknowledgement, without respect, without equality. 6 months after my surgery, I moved into a smaller, sunlit apartment with my 2 kids. It was modest, simpler than our old house, no extra rooms for guests, no space for family drama to settle and fester. It was ours, calm, uncomplicated, safe. I hosted Thanksgiving that year for the first time in my life. There were no toxic family members crowding the table, no favoritism, no hidden agendas, no quiet resentment simmering beneath polite conversation. It was just my daughter, my son, and my closest work friend, the woman who'd sat with me through my darkest days, who'd listened to every layer of my pain, who'd celebrated every small win of my healing. The house smelled of cinnamon and roasted turkey. My kids laughed loud and unreserved as they colored placemats and helped set the table. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden, falling over our small, perfect gathering. I stood in my quiet kitchen, stirring gravy, and smiled, a real, unburdened smile, the kind I hadn't known how to give for decades. I was not fully healed. Some scars don't disappear completely. The childhood ache of being overlooked, the marital wound of being abandoned, the quiet grief of loving people who never chose me, they still live in me, soft and faint, reminders of where I've been. But I was free. I no longer needed my parents to see my worth. I no longer needed my brother to validate my struggle. I no longer needed my husband's love to prove I was worthy of being cherished. I saw myself now. I chose myself now. I prioritized myself now. I spent my whole life being everyone's backup plan, everyone's convenience, everyone's last resort. I finally became my own first choice. As I listened to my daughter's bright laughter echo through the room, I understood the greatest victory of all. Healing is not about making them sorry. It's about living a life so full, so peaceful, so authentic that their loss becomes entirely irrelevant. If you've ever been the overlooked one, the eternal giver, the person who sacrificed endlessly for family and love only to be taken for granted, you are not alone. Your kindness was never a weakness, and your decision to choose yourself is never selfish. Drop a comment below. Have you ever sacrificed everything for people who never deserved you? What's one boundary you're finally ready to set for yourself? If this story resonated deep in your heart, hit the like button, subscribe for more raw, honest stories of healing and self-redemption, and share this video with anyone who needs a reminder that they deserve to be someone's first choice, not their last resort.